Welcome back to another video. Of course, my name is Gareth from Park Cameras, as it always is in every video. And today we're going to talk about black and white photography. We're going to talk about why you might choose to go black and white, the kind of questions you might want to ask yourself when deciding whether to go color or black and white, the kind of advantages and disadvantages of black and white. We're going to dive into Lightroom, do a little bit of editing, all kinds of fun activities, because of course, it's Tutorial Tuesday. Welcome back to Tutorial Tuesday, where each and every Tuesday we bring a brand new, fresh photography tutorial. This week, we're going to dive into Lightroom. We're going to talk about black and white photography, like I said, the disadvantages, the advantages, why you might choose to do it, the questions you should ask yourself when deciding whether to go black and white or color. Let's get into it. So before we dive into Lightroom, because I've got a picture I want to show you, and we're going to edit together in black and white, let's talk about why you might choose to go black and white. Now, it's a very powerful type of photography. It definitely lends itself to a certain type of emotion. It can really pull a certain vibe. It can really pull together a photo. There are times when you might want to use it to fix certain issues that you might have, and it can remove certain distracting elements of a photo if you have distracting color that you want to get rid of. So I shoot all of my photos in RAW. It means that I have the best possible starting point to edit my photo, the most room to do whatever I want to do with the photo. And that means that when it comes to editing, I get to choose, do I want this to be in color or in black and white? Now, full disclosure, most of the time I choose color, but the question I ask myself when I decide whether I am gonna edit in black and white is the color an important part of the photo? Does it help to tell the story or the message or the emotion of the photo? Is it a hindrance? Is it a distraction? And what is the key part of the photo? The color can definitely be a key part of it. It can even just be a nice part of it. Part of what I ask myself when I'm thinking about this is it more about the contrast between light and dark, between the highlight and the shadow? And if that's the case, the color can sometimes be getting in the way of that. If it is literally about that contrast, then the color doesn't necessarily have a place. Another question I ask myself is there a distracting color in the photo? Is it just very saturated, or is that color too bright as an actual color? Does it draw away from the actual subject of the photo? Does it enhance or detract from the photo? And that's essentially how I decide whether I'm gonna edit in color or in black and white. Now, most of the time, I've already decided a lot of this stuff when I'm taking the photo, so I'll stick with color. But sometimes you don't necessarily have a choice. Let's say this photo of this gorilla, for example. I didn't have a choice over whether the grass was super distracting in the background. I just had to nail the photo as it was there, as it was happening. Now, the reason I went for black and white in this photo is, first of all, to get rid of that distracting green background, but also because it lends itself to the emotion of the photo. It lends itself better to the kind of contrast between light and dark, and it just makes for a better overall feeling from the photo. Color can often be very happy, very vibrant, and give a certain type of message. Now, there's obviously then desaturated images which can look fantastic, like this photo, for example, of me. It's one of my favorite portraits of me, and I've often thought about putting it in black and white, but I like it as a desaturated photo because it allows me to essentially have the color in there, but it's really muted, and I think that actually works better than black and white. So here the color is actually telling part of the story, it's telling part of the emotion and the vibe from this photo. Whereas this cityscape, for example, I definitely chose to remove the color. Now, I've gone black and white. I've actually added a little bit of blue just into the black and white overall. That's across the whole image. That's just a stylistic thing. But the reason I took the color out of this photo and went black and white is because it definitely was more about the contrast, the dark, the light, the shadow, the highlight, and the color was just distracting. Now, I mentioned before that you can use black and white to fix certain issues, and we saw a little bit of that with the gorilla. Well, you can also use it to fix bad light, and that's part of what that cityscape photo is all about. That's harsh midday sun, pretty bad for photography, not a great look, but pop it in black and white and it can really help to mask that bad light and turn it into this contrasty image, which is exactly what I was going for. So, okay, let's dive into Lightroom. So let's look at a portrait like this one, for example. Now, this photo, I could go color or I could go black and white. It's a difficult one to choose, but let's ask ourselves the questions. Is the color an integral part of the image? Well, not really. There's some nice pastel colors there. I think they look quite nice. It's certainly not distracting or horrible, but I don't think it's really doing anything specific for the photo. Okay, so that's great. Is the color distracting? No, we've answered that one. So no, not really. We could probably mute down the greens in the background a little bit. But is this photo about the color? Not really. Is it more about the light and the dark, the shadow and the highlight, the contrast there? Well, kind of. And black and white might be a better way to tell the story, push the emotion of this particular image. This is Matilda. I shoot with her all the time. Got hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands, I don't know, maybe thousands of portraits of her. But let's look at how this might work in black and white. Now, she has a little bit of light on her face there, but her eyes are kind of looking down. I think the subject, the real focal point of the image is the eyes, which is fantastic for a portrait, even though you can't see them. But it's kind of telling a story of she's looking down. It's a bit of an emotion there. So let's pop it in black and white. Now, there's a couple of ways to go black and white with an image like this. A lot of people, when they're starting out, will just pull that saturation all the way down. And that does technically put it in black and white. But actually, the better way to do it is actually to click up here at the top of the kind of basic slider area here in Lightroom here. Let's go ahead and click black and white. The reason that's better is it's going to actually change some of these sliders further down. For example, we won't have the hue, saturation and luminance tab because there's no point, right? We don't have any color. Instead, we have things like a black and white mix where we can actually affect the luminance of the different colors within the photo. So for example, with orange, we could bring that up and it's going to brighten the orange, which in this case is on her skin tone. I'll bring that down. We could do that with the green. We could bring that all the way down or up and so on. Now, generally, when I go black and white, I'm emphasizing the contrast between light and dark. So in this case, I am going to bring up the contrast here a little bit. I'm probably even going to raise the highlights and bring the shadows down as well. I'm going to leave all of these others alone for now because I'm pretty happy with the overall global edits of the photo that I've done. But down here in the black and white mix, I think we can do a few things to enhance the photo. I'd love to isolate her a little bit more from her background, so we can bring that green down just to darken that background. Otherwise, I might just bring the orange up a little bit because I want her to be kind of the brightest focal point of the image. Now, in color, we didn't really have a problem in this lower corner, but in black and white, it feels a little bit bright. So we might have to come in and adjust that. Before we do that though, I'm going to come all the way down and I'm just going to add a little bit of a vignette. Brilliant. Now the rest of the edits we're probably going to do as local adjustments, which means using things like the gradient mask, the radial mask, the adjustment brush. So we're going to go ahead and click up here and I'm going to go ahead and click the linear gradient and just bring that in from the bottom left there. Now as I drag that in, you can see it's masking that really nicely, feathering the mask up. Everything in red is going to be affected and it's feathering into the image, and we're just going to bring that exposure down a little bit. Okay, I think that looks really nice. Let's go ahead and create a new mask. Let's go radial gradient. This time I'm going to just draw it over her face. Let's just turn that kind of in line with her face. And I'm going to brighten that a touch. Not too much. We might even come back and undo a little bit of that. Let's go ahead and do another radial gradient, which I'll draw over her face. And this time I'm going to invert it. So let's click this invert. That's going to be affecting everything outside of the circle. So let's bring the exposure down. Not too much because otherwise it looks a bit too kind of obvious. And let's go ahead and click done. Now what we've got is a much more interesting, contrasted, light, dark, highlight, shadow kind of image where we've got her face being the brightest part of the image and darkness kind of all around. I mean, in black and white, it really pushes the emotion. Now, I may have slightly overdone it and I might just want to brighten up some areas of her skin outside of her face. So I'm going to go for a brush, up the exposure here a little bit, use the scroll wheel just to bring up the size of this circle. And I'm just going to brush in over her hand there. And I'm going to get another brush, go for a lower exposure and just paint in over some of these shadows that we've got here. Almost a bit of dodging and burning, which is essentially brightening and darkening certain parts of the image. I think that's going to work really well. Now, if we turned all the masks off, which we can do by just toggling this little switch here, this is what it looks like with no mask. You can see how bright that bottom left was. Turn the mask back on, off, on. Really makes a huge difference to the photo. So in black and white, what I'm looking to emphasize is the light. The highlights, the shadows, as I've said a few times now, I think probably 100 times, the contrast between that light and dark. And I think this looks really good. I think we've done that here. So with this portrait in particular, I would probably choose the black and white version because, you know, there's a few things here. She's over to one side in the rule of thirds, but she's actually looking out of frame. There's most of the space is on her right. So normally I would frame this up slightly differently, have the space on her right, I suppose, left in the photo, because that's the space she's looking into. But because she's looking outside of the frame, it almost gives this slightly trapped feel. She's looking down as well. We can't see her eyes. It's kind of hidden. There's a lot of emotion going on there. And in black and white, I really think it kind of pushes it. Might be a bit too poetic, but, you know, I really like it. Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts on all this kind of stuff. When do you choose to go black and white? How do you decide between black and white or color? What do you do to kind of make that choice? I'd love to hear all of that stuff down in the comments. I read every single comment that you guys post, so I really appreciate all the fun stuff, all the good stuff that you guys put down there, because there's a lot of great insight from you guys. I think we've got a really good community. So I'd love to hear all that stuff. Of course, don't forget there's a full list of all the kit used for this photo, which, by the way, Panasonic 85mm. Ooh, yes. Liked it. Of course, all the kit for this as well, everything by following the links down in the description. Don't forget to like and subscribe as well. There's new content every single week. I'll be seeing you in the next video. But until then, as always, thanks for watching.